Okay, hi, this is Lee Mun Wah, straight from Stirfry Seminars in Berkeley, California. What I'm going to talk to you a little bit about is what's on our August newsletter, as well as some other issues that are going on today. In the newsletter, I took two questions out of Let's Get Real, which is the book that I wrote about Let's Get Real, what people of color can say and whites won't ask. And one of the questions that I asked was, what do you think keeps people of color and whites apart? I think that's a very significant question today, because I think we make a huge assumption that just because we may have people of different races all together, and we may have students that are all sitting in the classroom of all different cultures and ethnic groups, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we talk to each other. I think that's the big illusion in the United States. What we have there is a multiracial environment, but not a multicultural one. A multicultural one would mean that we're interacting, we're integrating, we're getting to know each other's cultures. And so I strongly believe that that question, what keeps us apart, is a really significant one. And when I ask most white people around, and people of color around, what keeps them apart, oftentimes it's around fear. And for white people, oftentimes around this issue of what keeps them apart, or with people of color, it's a fear that they might say the wrong thing. And I think that perhaps what we need to know is that we've had 500 years of don't ask, don't tell. So it's a very good chance that we're going to make mistakes. The real work, however, is to begin the conversation. And I think that sincerity goes a long way. You could say you're scared, I'm nervous, I'm afraid I'm going to say something wrong, and still keep talking. Because the truth of it really is, if we don't talk, if we don't begin to talk about what makes us scared and the stereotypes that separate us, as well as our own life experiences, what will happen is it will just stay apart. And when you carry all these stereotypes and all these experiences that may be negative, possibly is that you'll pass them on to your children, and then one more generation will be afraid of another person. So the hard work is whether or not you're going to begin the conversation, maybe even talk about those positive and negative stereotypes that in many ways generalize and don't allow you to really get to know someone else. I also strongly believe, the reason why I put this in the newsletter, these questions, is because I strongly believe that our teachers, administrators, etc., aren't prepared how to have this conversation. What these three comments from three white folks is about is some of their fears, as well as inherent in their fears is also perhaps some of their hopes to break through it. I strongly believe it is, even as a teacher for 25 years and therapist, that I really was not trained on how to work with diverse groups or people who were different than myself. Let alone, in all the years I went to school, no one ever once asked me, what's it like to be a Chinese person in therapy and in teaching, as well as in the United States? I think that that question itself is pertinent for women, for blacks, for Asians, Latinos, and for whites. I also think that one of the major reasons why whites don't ever have to answer this question is because, as Lauren Moyer said in The Color of Fear, they walk into a world that is theirs. And so perhaps it might be really relevant to ask people and to talk about, what's it like to be a minority? What's it like to be a majority, even though you may not identify in that way? But maybe sometimes when you're the majority and you're white, maybe it's something you never have to think about, just as men never really have to think about being male in a male-dominated world. The other question that was also there is, what do I think is the illusion? It was asked of people of color about race relations in the United States. What I liked about that question is that I think that there is an illusion because we have a black president. There's an illusion that we've gone beyond race. Or maybe even, as someone said, at the moment you start talking about race, it's reverse racism. Or why are we getting so ethnic? But the truth of it really is, all you have to do is look at the Olympics. Think of all the racism that occurred during that time. And you could call it bias or intolerance or whatever you'd like to do. But think about it. How Gabby was criticized, Gabby Douglas was criticized because of her hair. And people said, well, it was a lot of African Americans who do that. But I think that it's very important to take a good look at is the pressure that we put on African Americans, particularly around their hair. What's beautiful, what's not beautiful. And I think that when you start to see other African Americans questioning or criticizing another African American about their hair, I think it's that internalized racism, that somehow we've also learned to hate ourselves. And that if someone doesn't have straight hair or beautiful blonde hair, that somehow we're not as beautiful. I strongly believe that, I love what somebody once said is, as her coach said, I love her hair. She's beautiful just the way she is. I wonder, the truth of it really is, that's much more easier to say, but what have we been taught? What is beautiful hair and what is not? And perhaps one of the great illusions is that it's not a problem. The other thing too that I thought was just great about the illusion of race is looking at her uniform. It looked beautiful, Gabby Douglas's uniform that she wore. But think about all the people who said perhaps she wasn't patriotic enough, and how they were very insulted. Or maybe even Serene, who just won the gold medal there and did what they call a crip dance. And I'm kind of curious. People fall on the ground. People, if she had done the waltz, would you have said that was inappropriate? And I'm just kind of curious who her critics were. And what I always find very amazing is that it's kind of un-American, or most people think it was inappropriate, or most Americans, I didn't think it was inappropriate. In fact, isn't that beautiful? What happens if she had come from another country and had done a gesture that you weren't aware of, that didn't fit into your American world? Would you have said that it was inappropriate? You see, the dance and the moves that African Americans make is uniquely theirs. We've only stolen it, whatever we think is appropriate or inappropriate. Or even when President Barack Obama did this with his wife, some people thought that it was some kind of terrorist a gesture. The truth of it really is, if you really want to begin to know the rest of the world, don't you think we've got to stop wanting the world to look one way, or what's the most appropriate way? And for me, growing up as a Chinese man, that appropriateness never looked like me. Why? Because no one ever asked me. In fact, you could even say that what I'm wearing right now is inappropriate. Or as one person said in the United States Pentagon, with somebody who wore a suit, he looks professional and you don't, Mun Wah. Funny thing is, I think I'd look beautiful in the United Nations and he'd look boring. So that's it for me in my August newsletter here, talking about these things. Really would love you to go to our website, www.stirfryseminars.com. Yeah, and if you'd ever like to comment on this, what I've talked about today, feel free to write us or email us. We'd love to hear from you. And we'd also love to have a dialogue around some of these questions and some of the things you've heard today. Thank you.